Hello folks, welcome to another classic toy review from scorchertoys@anymoon.com. Today we're going back in time to September 2009 where 7,500 yen could get you this Bandai Armor Plus EX Gear Alto version. If you're shopping for new toys, hit the link in the comments below to head to Big Bad Toy Store and support this channel in the process. If you're shopping for this toy, it sold poorly, so it can still be found readily on the secondary market. This toy comes in a pretty sweet box with some original art and that collector style flip top lid that lets you admire it without removing it from the package. When you do pull the trays out, you'll find Alto in his pilot suit as well as 2 pairs of fixed post hands for the Alto figure, his helmet, his EX gear in various parts, 4 pairs of fixed post hands for the EX gear, his really big gun and a hand for holding it. And the second tray includes a display stand consisting of a base, arm, adapter, and supports. Behind it all, you'll find instructions, and I put a full scan of those up on anymoon.com. We're going to start with Alto without the armor on, and if you want to nitpick him visually, he certainly has an hourglass figure going on, which isn't quite right, but that's because of the way the different joints are within the abdomen there and the waist. And similarly, he's got a lot of thigh gap, and that's because of the way the thighs are constructed. And we'll go through the articulation in just a moment here. The biggest visual impairment beyond that are the very wide shoulders. That's not really characteristic of Alto and how we usually see him. And the build of the shoulders is very curious. They've got this peg that comes into this cover, and it pops out very easily, and it's super frustrating, and I'm convinced I'm going to lose that peg at some point and then have to figure out some way to get that cover on there. It would have been way more sensible for that peg to just be an integrated piece, or to just have the armors connect via the front and make them flexible. But they didn't do any of that. Heck, just molding the armors into the shoulders would have been a better solution than this. So those, visually the worst part of the toy, and also handling the toy, my worst part of the toy. Here is Alto's face. Looks pretty decent, although I know some people are gonna certainly nitpick it. You can never make everybody happy. You can see the collar is coming up here. That is a common problem. The head is on a ball joint, as is the hair while we're here. The head being on a ball joint allows it to look up and get cocked and all that good stuff. But the base of the neck is also a joint. But using that causes that collar to unpeg, which is very frustrating. There are pegs in the front, back, and sides on this collar, so it should lock into place really well. But once you start moving that head around, it almost always pops out on you, so that's pretty frustrating. Moving down, I'm going to go ahead and remove this armor so you can see it would have happened anyways. It basically just fell off in my hand. There's that separate peg, which is super annoying, but we'll move that aside. And by removing that armor, you can see better the mechanism of the shoulder, which I thought was pretty impressive. There is a ball within, and that allows the whole arm to pivot forward or pivot back or up and down. So that's really great range of movement. And then you have the ability to spin the arm around, and it's got that hinge there that lets it come all the way out. So you can get that arm pretty much in any direction you want it to. You can see there's also a swivel right at the top of the bicep and a double jointed elbow, which doesn't quite let you get the full 180, but maybe 150, so that's good. Hands are on a ball joint. We'll explore those a little bit later. And then moving towards the torso here, there is a ball joint above the navel that allows twisting and pivoting forward and back. And then there is a ball joint below, which allows the waist to go back and forth and pivot forward and back. So that's all great stuff there. Moving to the hips, which are also very well done. You can do the splits, which is good. You can twist right below the hip, which is good. You have the ability to go forward at the hip. The only thing that's really limited is coming back. So you can only come back about that far. But for most every pose I've been doing, that hasn't been too much of a hindrance. Then you have a double jointed knee, which allows you to get pretty extreme range of movement there. And the only joint that has kind of an extension that's at all a little goofy looking are these feet. And you can see that it's a ball joint with an extended peg. So it has this huge range of motion and is a little bit floppy. Surprisingly, the toy is well balanced enough that even with those floppy feet, I don't have too much of a hard time getting it to stand. And finally, we also get a toe pivot. So great articulation throughout, really well done joints. Like I said, we have an hourglass figure, we have some thigh gap. They're not perfectly concealed, but overall they are pretty well done and certainly feels in line with something you would get out of like the SH Figuarts these days. This predating that, I think. So great quality action figure, a little bit floppy in the ankle region, but still completely capable of standing without the included display stand. Toy comes with a couple accessories that you can use with just the plain Alto figure. The fixed post hands being an obvious example of that. So we can just pop this off. There is the underlying ball joints, and you can see it's a ball on either side, allowing it to pivot and move around. You just take one of your new hands and push it in, and it should just lock into place fairly firmly. Now be cognizant of that watch or whatever he's wearing there as you install it. That can give you a little problems. In fact, that watch is why you can't just take the larger EX gear hand and put the gun on, because that hand will bump up against that watch. Now you can kind of cheat and make it work anyways, but we'll get to that gun with the EX gear in just a moment. So there you've got him with his hands on, whichever ones you want, and we could take his head off next and grab our helmeted head. So this is what this looks like. You can see his face is inside through that clear visor, and we could just plug that on too, a little more firmly than that. There we go. And there you go. Now he is wearing his helmet, and you could see the shoulder armor flopping off on me and driving me nuts already. But there you go. There are your accessory pieces to go along with your Alto figure. Now we're ready to put the armor on the toy, and to begin that, we're gonna get these fixed post hands on that look like he's grabbing the controls of his EX armor, and we've got that helmet on, and then we're gonna grab our leg armor, and the leg armor has two pegs that come back from the knee, and we're just gonna pull forward, and then you can see there's this hinge here, and below that hinge is a cavity, and what we need to do is take our figure, bring the foot down, and then fish it through so that we get behind the hinge and the foot comes out into that cavity below. And once we've done that, we can then bring the armor up and snug it in with those pegs up on the top, and we will repeat with the other leg armor. Now we're ready to move on to the chest, and I gotta say there's some pretty impressive engineering in the chest. Before I get there, the shins on the legs, this is metal. So that's adding a little bit of heft there. For those of you who really care about metal content, that's the only metal we've come across so far. Here is the chest piece, and there goes the crotch armor, which is gonna be a common refrain. This is another one of those pieces where had Bandai had a second effort at this toy, I'm sure they would have figured out a way to get this crotch armor to fit on better, or maybe even just make it a hinged piece that came up in front. But unfortunately, we have this teeny tiny peg and this teeny tiny slot, and this pops off all the time. Now the good news is, for what we're doing right now, we actually wanted to remove that part. Then there are these chest flaps, and you should look at the chest flaps. There's one side that's pegging into the other, and so what you want to do is push down on one side while you pull up on the other, and then that frees up the pegs. Now this is a good time to point out that one of my pegs has broken off. So my lower peg, fortunately it's not affecting the toy too much. If that other peg goes though, I am totally screwed. So you'll see why that peg went in just a moment here. Once we get these down and out of the way, we can focus on the shoulders here, and you pull out this bar here, and you can see the shoulder is on a slider. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull that out as well and get that all the way removed. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. We're just gonna pull out at the base to get that arm all the way out, and then we'll pull out again to get that armor all the way out, and pull up these flaps here. And now you can see you've completely exploded out that armor piece. If we turn the toy around, it's got 3 holes. There are 3 pegs right there. We're just going to attach this to the back of the toy, which should not be a difficult step. There it goes. Press in. It's going to peg on very well, just like that. It can actually support that without any effort whatsoever. Let's get the arms up and out of the way. Now this is another area where this armor falling off can be very problematic, so hopefully yours is going to stay on for you here. Once we're up and out, we can bring over these flaps here and get them down in front. And then we want to bring up these flaps from below. Now these are flexible, so you've got a little optionality on how you do this. I'm going to go ahead and bring this one up, and I'm going to bring in this side here so it's all latched together. So there's a little peg going into a slot over there. This one that has the broken peg on it, I'm going to focus more on getting it up so I can get it over the slot that it goes on, and then I'll worry about bringing that piece down. So there you go, those are on now, and we can focus on the shoulders. So we're going to bring these up, we're going to bring them over. Now there is a peg on the top of the shoulder that is supposed to mount to that very floppy piece inside the arm. So let's bring that in, kind of bring these up and then bring them forward, and it should latch into place. And you see you've got this cover on the side. So we'll do the same thing over here. Now we can pivot this back, kind of slide it in until we get it to latch into that armor. So that's good. And then we can reach back over here, grab this piece and peg that on firmly into place. And if you move the toy, things might start coming apart on you. So let's, I didn't get that shoulder on properly, and that's why it freaked out like it did. The crotch armor though really is just that problematic. So you're gonna wanna try to find something that you can do to help tighten that piece up. All right, now grab your hip kibble. It should be marked with an R or an L to let you know you got the right one. You're gonna fish it in kind of right along with the leg inside the armor, and then come up and just plug it into the ball joint like so. And then you're gonna grab your forearms. They're the next step. Piece looks like this. It opens up, and this is the bottom actually, and it swings forward like so. And you can put the grip inside that hand, and then you want to get that hand or that piece inside the forearm there. Now this is definitely a little tricky fit. Once you got that on there, you can bring over the cover, but it's a very snug fit, so you gotta have everything lined up just right. Bring that over and collapse it onto the forearm, and you're going to need to apply some pressure there, get it all locked into place, and there you go. Now he's got his hand on the handle and his forearm armor on. My crotch armor had fallen off again, so I've gone ahead and reinstalled that. Now I'm going to peg in the fixed posed hand to that ball joint at the end of the gauntlet we just installed, and then I'm going to spin my toy around. I can pivot these pieces back now, and I can grab my wings out of the tray, and you want to curl in the end of the wing and kind of get it into a position somewhat like this, and then it just pegs into the back, which is pretty self-explanatory. And in touching that, I almost knocked off my crotch armor yet again. But once we've got that on there, we can do a little fine tuning. It should look something like that in the wing department. And to wrap things up, we're going to take the helmet and we're going to install it kind of backwards, honestly, by pegging it on there. And you can see it's really floppy and odd, and you might have just heard my crotch armor fell off yet again. But once it's on there, it can kind of lean up and come back and come over the head, which is pretty cool. And there you are now in armor mode. Let's get that crotch armor back on yet again. So there that goes. And we can take our big old gun and plug that into the hand, and it is ready for business. Armor on the toy, and it looks pretty good. Now remember, this toy was released a long time ago, so some joints are getting loose, and that is particularly problematic for my leg joints. Remember I said this is a metal shin, so that makes these legs want to move pretty freely. The knees also not as stiff as I would like them, so when posing this toy, it's not unheard of for it to try to fall backwards like it just did there. So that's pretty annoying. And then again, if I touch that crotch armor, it wants to fall off as well. Now I showed you that this head spins around, which is cool. It does that without having to be disconnected. It comes down over the head, and you can kind of push it down to a lower position where it would really seem to be augmenting the rider's vision. So that's cool there. And you can spin it around a little bit, as you can see. It's not the same range of movement that you had before. It would have been cooler if they had figured out a way to make it so this pivot point could slide left and right, or made this a double ball joint that allowed it to travel a little further to get better turning the head poses. But as you can see, not terrible there. Crotch armor already popped off again. So this is pull that off. Now you can remove the head entirely and put the regular Alto head back on the toy. Hair is going to have to be off to the side, but you can definitely get that look, which is cool. You can then tuck the helmeted head into an arm to make it look like he's carrying his helmet around if you really wanted to. So articulation without the armor on was fantastic, but it is reduced, I'm just going to put this aside for the moment, by the armor when it's on there. So I love this toy when it's not wearing the armor. When it's wearing the armor, things not quite as good. Now, the shoulder armor can come up in a way, which is taking off the shoulder cover as well, to give you more range of movement with the arms. But you can see no matter what, it's going to hinder that shoulder. So even though this is a ball jointed flap on the end, it's not going to completely get out of the way of the arm, and the arm is not going to have that same range of movement that you had before. The elbow is still pretty good. You can still twist at the waist. The torso is a little bit more limited because we have this big plate going along the spine there. The legs also more limited because now we have these ball joint pieces on there. You can still get them out. You can come back not quite as far as you could before because there's these flaps that come down behind the butt. So that's going to be limited. And then the knee also went better than 90 degrees without the armor on. With the armor on, you're going to get about 90 degrees. There are separate feet on the leg armors. They have very similar articulation to what that original ball jointed foot had. So no complaints there whatsoever. So you can get this toy in some really cool poses. Not quite as many as you can before you put the armor on, and balance will become an issue as these joints start loosening up on you. Speaking of joints getting loose, I would have liked it if these wing joints had ratchet points to them that set them where you'd want them to be. And of course you can give him a flying pose by bringing the wings out, but you could see the hinges are now loose enough where I should probably apply some glue of some sort to get that hinge to be a little bit stiffer. But you get the general idea. There you go. We can do flying pose. I should probably put the helmet back on for this. But there you go. So fun, but definitely not as fun as it was before we put the armor on, except now he's wearing the armor and that looks pretty cool. Years later, Bandai released the Cheryl SHF Figuarts figure, which is a great accessory for this EX armor toy. So you can have him flying around, helping Cheryl out, which is pretty cool. The toy has a display stand it comes with. Not gonna stop the crotch armor from falling off though. The toy connects to the display stand via an adapter in the back. It's a fat peg that's going through there and allows you to pitch the toy in either direction. And it has a pivot point there and a twist point even lower down. So you can have a lot of fun with what is basically an overgrown Tamashii Stage Act display stand with an SMS base. Not a lot of weight, no heft to this base, so you still have to be careful in how you balance the toy. But overall, it is going to lead to a little bit more fun factor as the toy is a lot less frustrating when you've got it pegged in. This toy does have another trick up its sleeve, and that's the ability to convert into the seated in the cockpit version of the EX gear. And to do that, we are going to start by taking the shoulder armor and rolling it back off that cover on the shoulder here and into the back, and then we will bring it out and extend it away and tuck it back in like so, and repeat on the other side. Now we're going to take the armor on the chest and we are going to disconnect it by pulling out on the my right side and unpegging it like so. Bring your arm up, and again, these covers can be difficult, flop off on you, but bring that back around. Same thing on the other side here. We're going to bring this down, unpeg it there, have that go all the way behind the figure, and then lift these guys up. And there you go. Now the chest armor is attached on the back, but no longer in the front of the toy. Turning our attention to the back, your toy probably looks something like this. I'm gonna get the wings up and out of the way for a moment so we can focus on what's going on back here. Move the shoulders further out, like so, to now allow these chest pieces to come all the way back, and then just kind of wrap them to the outside to give yourself some clearance. And then you're going to take the helmet and lift it up so it's not tucked on the corner there, and bring the wings all the way down. And then you are going to want to angle them forward in a way that does not have them hitting the shoulder parts or the chest. So here I've got this piece on the chest in their way, so I'm going to spin that upward to create the clearance, to then bring the wings on through like so. And don't get hung up too much on this right now. We're going to fine tune everything as we go. All right, so now we want to get the arm to look like it's handling the controls, and to do that we're going to have to separate this piece here. And I find the easiest way to do it is get a nail in and pull down there, and then once you've done that, to lift up. Now it fell off. You can theoretically do this as a perfect transformation step, but we didn't pull that off. So what you want to do is have it look like this, where his hand is on the control and the gauntlet is open. Next, we're going to go ahead and remove the leg armor. So just pull that forward and slide your foot back out, and we'll worry about putting it back on after we've gotten him in the seated position. So now grab your display stand base, grab your display stand connector, and we are going to slide that in behind the butt in front of the wings. And I'm going to lose my crotch armor for sure doing this, but let's go ahead and push that in. Oh, I didn't lose. Oh, there it goes. Once that's on, we can set the toy on the display stand, and we can move the legs into a fairly natural sitting position, and it will be held up by the one peg. But then we can take these other ones, put it into the hand, so you need the fists that are meant for gripping, and then that goes in as well, and that's going to get those hands in the proper position. So here we're going the same thing on the other side here, and get that into place. And there you can see he is now in the seated position. We are definitely going to be fine-tuning some things, but now he is ready to get his shoes back on. Now we're going to pull the hip armors forward so they follow the leg as they come up and out. And there goes the crotch armor yet again. So you would just put that on as your last step. Now what we want to do with the foot, instead of fishing it through like we did originally so it's in the bottom part, we're going to leave it on top of the hinge this time. So bring it on into the leg, up to that hinge, and then go ahead and leave it open like so, and just bring the leg down. And one thing about the foot is it's got fake wheels in it. They don't actually spin, but it does have a peg slot in the middle. So as you curve the knee down, you will find that peg spot in the display stand that you can then lock into position. And there you go. Now we're going to repeat with the other leg armor. So here you go. Now you're ready for the fine tuning. I've brought the hip armors up on top like so. I want to make sure your shoulder covers are in their proper position. These shoulder armors in the back should also now be tucked in behind. They might not have been before. You want to get these spikes in the back vertical. You want to get the helmet tucked in behind like so. And there you go. Now it looks like he is ready to pilot either a VF25 or a YF29, and this would make a great display to go along with maybe some DX toys that you own otherwise. Overall, with this position here, purely for display purposes, you can't really do much with it once you get it here. But the toy looks great, but clearly not the best handling. Lots of things popping off on me as I went through the paces. So still something good to accent your SHF Figuarts figures. And it is a good Alto figure if you didn't put the armor on. So, you know, not something necessarily you need to avoid. But from a pure handling perspective, especially when that armor gets on, it can definitely be frustrating and is not for everyone. Check out anymoon.com for my full review, subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching.